Hi, everybody. Thank you for coming. My name is Brenda Davies. I have a YouTube channel called God is Gray, and I'm the author of this book, On Her Knees, Memoir of a Prayerful Jezebel. So I was just going to read from the prologue of the book, and then we'll probably have a lot of time to kill after that. So I'd love to just have a nice conversation with everybody. And if anyone wants to move in, no pressure whatsoever, but maybe for questions, we can feel more intimate and together and have a little talk. Also, warning, there's some profanity in this, so I hope that doesn't offend anybody. Okay. This is about purity culture for anybody who doesn't know. I'm very, very anti. Okay. I've been closing my eyes, determining what to write. How could I introduce you to what I've been through these past 20 years? How could I explain that whatever color, creed... Oh my God, I am messing up. I don't want to read that part. I want to read the introduction. This is my second go ever, so please excuse me. I think another fun thing to just let you know is that I wrote an iteration of this book 7 years ago or something like that. And it was a fictionalized account of my life and all of the crazy trauma that I had been through purity culture, which I didn't recognize it as purity culture at that time. I didn't have the terminology of deconstruction. There was no such thing as progressive Christianity. It was just a prodigal son journey. That's what I thought I was on. I thought that I was completely alone. I had no idea that one day I'd be at a festival actually resonating with people who had been through the same sorts of things. So I wrote this book, and it was 700 pages. I'm sure it's completely unreadable. It's like way too long for anyone. And I was shopping it around to mainstream agents and book agents in LA and New York. And the consensus was, we love this material, but there's no audience for this. So I was thinking to myself, there's absolutely no way, even if there's 100 girls splattered somewhere in the United States of America, someone needs to hear this story. Someone else has been through what I've been through. And then I went in reaction to all this rejection. I went on YouTube and Google, and I was like, sex-positive Christianity, LGBTQ-affirming Christianity. And I found, to my utter dismay, that the 10 or 8 years that I'd been out of church, nothing had seemingly changed. I found these YouTube channels that were from girls just like I had been in high school and middle school, who were reiterating the same points of toxic theology that had really, really destroyed my life, broken my heart, caused me so much sexual trauma and pain. And my final straw was I saw a girl, and she was in San Diego, blonde, prim, in her really nice, affluent San Diego home. And she was telling her audience of 200,000 or 300,000 young, impressionable people that God is her birth control, and she just trusts God with her fertility. And I was storming around my house with so much rage that I was just in my own head, oh my God, she's telling people of all different socioeconomic status and all kinds of things that they can just sit around, pray to God, and trust God with the fertility. Nothing about sex education, nothing about condoms, didn't even mention a pull-out method, nothing. It was trust God. So I dusted off this camera that I had sitting in my house, and I started God is Gray, my YouTube channel. And I have this really distinct memory where it was a waking vision. I saw this field that was completely open, and there was 4 dense layers of forest on all sides of the fields. And in my vision, the moment I uploaded the video, the first one, I stepped into that field, and I was completely alone and exposed, because I was I'm going to get attacked for this. People are going to hate what I have to say, but I have to say it. And then in the distance, I saw this pretty brunette woman, and she was waving at me. And then I saw more and more and more people coming out of the forest and standing in this field with me. And I knew that God was telling me, you're not going to be alone. You take this one step and you will find your people and you will find resonance, and more people will come into this field with you. And Linda K. Klein, the author of Pure, was, in retrospect, that brunette woman who came out of the field to wave at me, because she was the very first person I saw in this field. And now all of us are standing in this field together, and it completely came true. So I'm so honored to be here. The channel grew to, like, I think it was maybe 50 or 60,000, and then I found a publisher to make this book, which was my OG goal in the first place. So now I have this, and I'm excited to share this with you, and I'll do it right this time. I'm not reading the prologue. We're reading the introduction. Okay. Oh, also, Joshua Harris wrote the foreword for my book, the author of I Kissed Dating Goodbye. This was a monumental moment. This is like the most full circle beautiful thing that the godfather of purity culture, who destroyed my life, denounced his book, took it off the shelves, and said, read this book instead. So honored, so happy about it. Okay. There's this terrible story in I Kissed Dating Goodbye by Joshua Harris. He wrote the inverse of A Happily Ever After, and I'll never forget it. The story, the supposed retelling of a girl's bad dream, became a nightmare for millions of Christians. It was finally here, Anna's wedding day. Anna walked down the aisle toward David. Joy surged within her. This was the moment for which she'd waited so long. It was true. Christian girls were waiting to be wed. Really, we were waiting to have sex. At least, we were supposed to be waiting to have sex. Despite being outwardly religious, my mom and dad were tight-lipped about intercourse. It took a while for them to admit they were a pair of divorcees on their second marriage. My brother Chris sat, mouth agape, at our Polish Christmas Eve. I'm 14, and you're just now telling me Mom was married before? We realized over a plate of pierogies that my parents forgot to pass that info on to the youngest of us. They may have been ex-weed smokers coming off the sexual revolution, but their awkwardness on the subject of intimacy would have fooled anyone. Our Catholic guilt-infused household was one where bodies tensed at the sound of a moan on late-night television. If I sat in front of the TV, parents directly behind me, I'd cease to breathe while Elizabeth Perkins offered her breast to Tom Hanks in Big, or when Patrick Swayze wrapped his arms around Demi Moore at the Potter's Wheel in Ghost. Entering puberty in a sex-silent household, the topic became humiliating and intriguing in equal measure. I needed to know more. Thankfully, or so I'd thought, my hip, young, kinda hot youth pastor talked about sex often. Pastor Scott gifted me a black and gold NIV Bible with Brenda Marie Davies embossed on the leather. The inside read, "Fife, every answer you ever need is within these pages. Always, P. Scott." Always. An electric surge knocked me to my knees. Amen and hallelujah. Pastor Scott called me Fife, like Michelle Pfeiffer, and you might cry perv, but he was the only person who made me feel pretty in metal braces and with a constellation of acne strewn across my forehead. I never had a negative experience with Pastor Scott anyway. He was earnest and kind. He read us Jeremiah 29:11, "For I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord, plans to give you a hope and a future." He said this ancient verse was penned for us, evangelical teens. Standing on the teal carpet of a reclaimed strip mall shop at youth group, our Jesus love and futures were bright. I worshiped the Lord in Cherry Hill, New Jersey, and the master of the universe was talking to me. I cherish certain experiences from this time period. Pastors Scott, Matt, Tanya, and Mike presented the Bible in a way that was accessible and inviting. In contrast to the stoic hymns of Catholicism, the cool Christian teens were bumping Jars of Clay and DC talk. In youth group, I prayed aloud like a powerful woman of God. I was hot like Michelle Pfeiffer. My life meant something, and it would mean something even more when I got older. Just you wait, I'd think, while Brooke and Mandy teased me for having a coughing spell in pre-algebra. He knows the plans he has for me. I survived the cruelty of public high school by repeating this verse and praying in the company of sexy babes like John Adair. John Adair had bright green eyes. He had to be kind to me because he was Christian. Hi, John. My intestines tangled at the sight of him. Hey, Fife. I'd do anything to graze his sun-kissed arms. And those thick lips, my God. John Adair's back formed a slim triangle from his shoulders to the top of his hips. I sucked my tongue to calm the sheer emotion of seeing his Adam's apple swell from afar. And ladies called them lead lines, the indents trailing from a boy's abs down to his And herein lies the problem. I'd grown up casually Catholic, but when I attended a born-again, quote, non-denominational Christian church at 12 years old, my sexual fascination skyrocketed, and with it, my anxiety about, quote, saving myself for marriage. At the periphery of our message Bibles, we formed a sweaty circle of preteens dying to touch each other, kiss each other, lick each other. We talked about how to avoid premarital sex and how amazing sex would be within our marriages. We talked about sex constantly, but not like our secular counterparts. Our sexual desire was innate, inherent, but we called it lust. We called our libido's original sin. If I were to go on a date with and perhaps kiss John Adair, our sin nature would have gotten the best of us. I'd be a harlot, a Jezebel, or easy for making myself desirable and available. John's walk with God required impeccable self-control, including heeding the call to never masturbate. If we, quote, fell sexually, my female body would have caused my brother to stumble. Romans 14:13. In this fictional scenario with my crush, our fall would not only be a mark against us at the heavenly gates, our sexual choices would diminish our worth as future spouses. My value, especially as a woman, as a wife, would be in jeopardy. I cannot tell you how many sermons I've heard about my value as a woman. Most recently, in an ebook titled You're Worth the Wait, Christian speaker and author Lisa Bevere writes that, quote, women lose when they give in. In the chic font of a cool, approachable Instagram post, Lisa warns that we women, quote, forfeit our dignity, honor, and strength when we, quote, give ourselves away too soon. And when you are broken sexually, it makes it incredibly difficult for you to give yourself completely because you are not complete. Oof. I don't know about you, but being told the sexually active are not complete is like getting a sucker punch to the pussy. It hurts. And if that word offends you, buckle up. This is a Christian book about a Christian book, but that's not the last time you'll be reading the word pussy. But I digress. I loved God so much, so profoundly since I was a kid, that when I learned God cries when you masturbate, the thought itself made me cry. I'd never want to hurt God. You know, the incarnate God with the genitalia that makes him a man, the God whose literal tear ducts allow him to cry when I masturbate. I was told that sex outside of marriage, even the thought of unwed sex, was grievous to my Creator. Joshua Harris's story, The Bad Dream, about a girl named Anna, took this step further. I Kiss Dating Goodbye required young adults to consider their future spouses when touching themselves or one another. The one was on their way, and they'd be disappointed in our lack of self-control. And Anna's story is worth telling so you'll understand my heart, as the Christians would say. Anna is marrying David. Joshua Harris describes their ceremony, attended by family and friends, as sunlit poured through the stained glass windows, and the gentle music of a string quartet filled the air. Anna meets her beau at the altar while the pastor reads their vows. And a woman from the congregation stands up, walks quietly, and grabs David's other hand. Another girl stands, then another, until a chain of 6 girls stood behind him as he repeated his vows to Anna. In his dashing tuxedo, every wedding detail otherwise perfect, David is forced to explain the intrusion of these women. I'm sorry, Anna. They're girls from my past. I've given a part of my heart to each of them. Anna's lip quivers. I thought your heart was mine. It is. Everything that's left is yours. In other words, sex diminishes us. People who have sex are less than. They've given something away. That something is their inherent value to both God and their future spouse. The non-virgin was born with a whole heart, but now it's in pieces. To display this apparent truth in a tangible way, pastors brought Hershey's and Wrigley's to Wednesday night services. The boys were told to break off pieces of chocolate or to chew the sticks of gum and then answer questions like, do you like this grody chocolate bar? Does anyone want to chew the gum Anthony had in his mouth? Ew, no. The boys were repulsed, and rightfully so, when it comes to sharing bubble gum. The problem was this gum was meant to be my body, my sex. These examples were called object exercise, and the revolting thing in each exercise, the gum, the chocolate bar, the clean cup of water the boys spit into one at a time, was meant to symbolize me, a woman. Never mind the sexually assaulted who didn't have the luxury of forfeiting their dignity. If you've messed up by causing a brother to stumble, forgiveness is a prayer away. Simply repent, and your, quote, sin will be forgiven by God. If you expect the sin of premarital sex to be forgiven by your future spouse, however, that would be a different story. Human beings aren't always so merciful. When I considered both my creator and the one, my future husband, I wanted to be above reproach, my heart intact. My girl group, Kelly, the other Kelly, Maria, and Tara, rushed to the Christian bookstore to pick out purity rings. I settled on a silver band with a heart and a key. It slid onto my wedding finger, and I couldn't wait to wear it to school. I was already kicking up a storm by praying on the front lawn of the high school while the yellow buses whooshed by and students jeered. My Kent Hovind creationist apologetics exacerbated my biology teacher. Everyone knew I was saving myself for marriage, and they laughed. But it was all good. John 15:18, if the world hates you, keep in mind that it hated me first. Only now do I know that reveling in hatred can be a sign you're more of an a-hole than a disciple. In my doe-eyed ignorance, and I say this with compassion toward my sweet young self, I planned a purity ceremony for my evangelical youth group. My girls and I had the rings. All we needed was to make our pledge official. One Friday night, while my peers were somewhere indulging in hard lemonade and indiscriminate hand jobs, we Christian teens were dressed in white, promising our purity to the Lord. I signed a virginity contract in the presence of my parents. If anything happens, that's okay with us, Mom said. Our love is unconditional. She was being gentle, worried that building a sexual ethic on a foundation of shame and fear would cause it to crumble. But I was perfect. I was a good girl. This would be a piece of cake. God, send my husband soon. In Jesus' name, amen. All right. So that is the prologue to the book. And I think one thing I'd really like to share about the writing of this is that because of these messages that I have just described to all of you about my virginity being in my worth and everything that happened after that, including finding out my husband was cheating on me while we were dating, which really rocked my world because I was told, just be a good girl, and you'll live happily ever after and ride into the sunset with your person. When all of that shattered and broke down, I ended up getting in so many situations that caused me shame, and they were bred from this shame that had been instilled in me from birth. I was just listening to Dr. Tina Shermer Sellers. If there's any parents in here, please buy her books and listen to her podcast because she is about raising children without shame and fear when it comes to sexuality. And I will tell you that the benefit of teaching your children this way and also reparenting your young sweet self and having compassion for who you were in these formative years and the lies you were told about your value or where you would lose your value or your love from God are just untrue, and they're worth unpacking because I got in non-consensual sexual situations. There's some really, really sad stories in this book. I had a moment once where I completely disembodied when someone was treating my body in a way that I didn't want to be treated. And the reason I floated above myself and what I remember telling myself in that moment was, well, what did you expect? You're not a good girl anymore. This is what happens when you're not a good girl. Instead of knowing my worth and knowing my inherent value as a child of God, as a sexual being, as my own autonomous being, and being in my body in that moment and saying, I don't want to have sex like this, because it's not just about these binaries of black and white. I'm allowed to give a blowjob to my boyfriend, but I'm not allowed to have penetrative sex. All these stupid rules that are arbitrary that we line up to make us feel like maybe, just maybe, we're worthy of God's love, and maybe, just maybe, we can maintain a semblance of our relationships with our church friends and folks and our family who is asking us to live up to this purely heterosexual, monogamous with one person till the day you die kind of life that doesn't come true for all of us. I didn't have a happily ever after, and I know many, many people who believe that happily ever after was a lie as well. And I'm so, so honored, and I love divine timing. It's so beautiful to remember these evangelical lessons I was told about a moment like this. I was told that one day I would have a voice, that one day I would be a writer, and I saw it in this very specific way. But I love the way it's come to pass, because by the time I published this book, I'd spent 3.5 years on my YouTube channel talking to experts, learning all this new terminology I had no idea about, from non-binary and two-spirit and pansexual and asexual and beyond sexuality, just the ways that I'd been lied to about biblical interpretation, and really learning about patriarchy and how that has really diminish so many people's worth, and how it doesn't do anyone favors, including for men. I know you men out there are heartbroken as well. Purity culture hurts all of us because it is built on shame and fear. And that's the irony of it too. The Bible says over 90 times, don't fear. God says, I got you, don't fear. Who is the author of fear? Our enemy. And yet we build this sexual foundation on fear, and we build our churches in fear, and fear of hell. If you do the wrong thing, what? Fear. Something bad is going to happen to you. It's the opposite. God is love. And that does not mean you excuse every ill behavior. That doesn't mean you let go of every traumatic thing that happened. It's the opposite. This three-pronged circle, as I see it, of love God, love your neighbor as you love yourself. Those are 3 points of love. And I find sometimes loving God is easier than loving my neighbor, or loving my neighbor is easier than loving myself. But it just keeps going like that. It's the human condition. You'll always be challenged by love. But love is about conviction. Shame is like a vampire. It knocks on your door and is like, hey, do you want to feel like shit about that thing you did yesterday? And then all of a sudden you're like, okay, I guess I'll let that shame in. I guess I feel bad. Whereas conviction is so subtle that I remember one time I flippantly had said, screw Paul, the Apostle Paul, because I had built this channel and I was trying so hard to advocate for my LGBTQ brothers and sisters before realizing I'm bisexual, which took me my entire life to realize because I wasn't allowed to know that about myself. And Paul was the one person that just kept coming up against me, because you could dismiss Leviticus and all the OT, Testament, whatever, but Paul and his clobber passages would come up again. I've studied that more. That's a whole other talk. But the reason I began diving into the Apostle Paul and the clobber passages is because I was at a dinner party in mixed company, and I said something like, oh, screw Paul, or maybe I even said F-U-C-K Paul. And I felt conviction, which is so different than shame and so different than fear. It's God just giving you that ping that's like, oh. And then all of a sudden, after everyone had left my house and I was by myself, I thought, okay, God, but you're going to have to explain to me why I shouldn't say F Paul, because he sounds like an asshole, and I just need to understand why. So that's, like I said, a whole other journey, and now I actually have so much admiration and respect for Paul. But that just goes to show how much you can trust your inner compass that God has given you. That just goes to show you like how much you can really trust the process of self-discovery and sexual discovery and gender discovery and everything, discovering what you don't know about those around you that you love, that you admire, that you have complicated or challenging relationships with. We're all in this together. I also love the way theologian Pete Enns described it to me. Not to compare all of us to dogs, but this is Pete Enns. You can blame him. He was saying that he feels like God is so with us, that we are so held by divinity, and our exploration can be so big and expansive. It's like a dog on one of those like bounce back leashes. He says, imagine that you just have so much room to explore, and you're allowed to consider, like for me, what if this girl crush thing I've been talking about for a really long time is actually a little more sexual than I've been allowed to acknowledge? Or what if anything? What if yoga is good for me? What if I'm allowed to meditate and think about something different? Whatever it may be for you, trust that it's like that leash, that you'll feel that like subtle, it's not even subtle, it's just like small, that like gentle but firm pull of conviction that says, that you went a little too far. When you said F Paul, a little bit too far. And trust that divinity has you, and you can pull back and be like, okay, so what's about that? What is it about that? And when I was able to let go of those external vampires of shame and fear and say, no, you're knocking on my door, but I'm not going to let you in anymore, there's so much room to play and so much room to learn about yourself. So the last thing I'll say, and I'd love to open this up for conversation after this, is that my dear friend Josie right here is going to be in the back right after. I couldn't haul all these books, but I made this really beautiful book package. It's this green, beautiful package with this bookmark and postcard and a candle, and they'll be on sale for $32 plus shipping. You'll just have to Venmo me your address and the payment and your name so I can write you a little note, and I'll get your packages to you. So that's that. Does anyone have anything to say? Questions, thoughts, anything? Yes? Marriage and Catholic purity culture? Mary, oh, her being a virgin? Well, I'm not an expert on that, but I do know how babies are made, and I find it a bit questionable. I think the most important thing, like when you're on this exploration, to really embrace the phrase, I don't know. Like, can I categorically say beyond a shadow of a doubt that Mary was or wasn't a literal virgin? No. But can I tell you that she's been propped up as this, quote, virgin to stifle and repress and keep women in a position where we feel like the only acceptable way to be is this perfect way, this virginal being? Like, she's propped up this way because this is where especially women have been told that our value lies. So I really think having fun with theology, like rabbis do. I've heard that they'll like get wine and get a little tipsy together and argue in a really fun way over the Torah and their interpretation and their thoughts on it. I want us to be like that. Like if the church could actually play with these things that we frankly are not going to know the real answer to until the day we die, then that's all good. It's more like, okay, so what is this message telling us? What am I receiving from this? Why was she propped up in this way? Is that serving us as modern women, as Christian women who are trying to find our value in other places besides whether or not we've been penetrated by a man? That's not the most valuable, precious thing about us. Does that answer? Okay, I'll try to sum this up if anyone couldn't hear. Thank you. I feel like I'm telling a private story. I'm like, so she said that her husband cheated on her. No, that's awful. I have been there. But she was asking basically about how to find your voice, especially for us women being told, be meek, be small. You're not allowed to speak freely about anything. And even if you're speaking, it has to be within these parameters of what you've been taught is right and wrong. Like so little room to explore and come up with your own ideas, correct? Yeah. And that she has 2 daughters as well. So it's like how to parent them in a way where they're not going to get stuck in the same sort of toxic theology and the outpouring of that we've seen in our own lives. Well, I'm definitely an advocate of therapy, accredited, maybe non-Christian. I mean, they can be Christian. They can... I'm just very wary of Christian therapy because I don't want them to lead you right back into purity culture. But definitely those kinds of sources are really helpful because trauma is real. I think something I love sharing with people is that on this discovery of progressive Christianity and all the things that I've been learning, they have actually added to the DSM the concept of religious trauma, which hadn't been there before. So a lot more mainstream therapists are really like recognizing that this is a real thing, that the fear of hell, that toxic theology can actually manifest and replicate signs that are similar to PTSD. Linda K. Klein talks about this in her book Pure, how this fear of your sexuality, this fear that is infused in you about gender role and what you're supposed to be as a man or a woman manifests physiologically as well. Men can get erectile dysfunction, have post-coital panic attacks. Women have vaginismus, which actually means that your body is not wanting to accept anything, and your body is having this response to your internal shame, which is wild. It's like your body is protecting you from this thing, and so many women have described that after 20-some years or more of being told you're not allowed to have sex, it's bad, a white wedding dress and one day with partying with your friends doesn't necessarily flip that switch, and it can manifest in these ways after you've already been a good girl and done all the right things. And like I said, men, you experience it too. So therapy, finding someone that's accredited, that understands and respects the reality of religious trauma is really helpful. And then for myself, as someone that had to unpack all of this by myself, thinking I was alone for 10 years, which is how I did it, one of the most important things to me was recognizing that God actually genuinely wants us as a holistic, fully embodied being. A lot of us in evangelicalism were told your heart is deceitful, your flesh is evil. I think the most stunning thing about this is the original Greek, the word Satan translates literally to the divider. So anytime someone is asking you to divide body and soul, my flesh and my heart, they're evil, deceitful, my spirit is this thing, you are doing something, ironically, literally satanic, according to the Bible, which is separating yourself. If you're gay or non-binary or anything that's not this typical, thing that evangelicals are supposed to be, just a straight, whatever you were assigned at birth is who you are. Anytime you veer out of that, and then you have to compartmentalize and be like, well, this is an unacceptable part of myself. For me, when I was trampaging, as I call it in my book, because that was my response, I do not recommend this. This is what you don't do. My response to the same trauma as you was to swing the pendulum all the way to the other side. So when I had swung to the other side and I was trampaging and being like, screw it, I don't care, I'm going to do whatever I want with my body, I'm not going to think about it, without having any foundation of self-worth. I mean, the opposite. I was told, well, now I'm a chewed up piece of gum. Now I'm willfully being a chocolate bar or water that men have spit into. So when you have that paired with trying to find honor and trying to advocate for yourself in intimate situations, Sometimes it goes okay, sometimes it's great and blissful, and sometimes it goes very wrong, which you'd read about in On Her Knees. And I don't want anyone, your daughters or you, to experience that. So it's about the holistic experience, like really taking the time to deep dive and play with these pieces of yourself and look and say, okay, I never wanted to be like this. I was told I had to be this thing. I had to be a straight person. I had to be the gender I was assigned at my birth. I have to be monogamous to one person for my entire life or else. When you start breaking these ideas apart, maybe they're all right for you. Maybe that is the perfect path for you and you thrive in that. I know those people. I know all two of them. Truly, though, out of the 17 people in the chastity ceremony I organized, I know one girl who is still married to the man that she pledged herself to. So good luck, and that's great. But for raising, I have a son. He's only 19 months, so I can't prop myself up as an expert mother. But I intend to allow him to reveal himself to me. I'm not going to presuppose anything about especially the most intimate pieces of himself, like his gender or sexuality or desire or dreams. Like I wouldn't suppose he's going to be a career musician or something. I'm not going to suppose he's straight. I just want him to come home from school and be like, I think Billy's cute. And I'll be like, is that a girl or a boy? I don't know. And that's great, and support that. And then if you think about the way that you would, it helps me coming from a background of such a deep lack of self-worth that I got from evangelicalism. And my home too, my parents are really supportive, but like I said, sex silence also creates an anxiety and shame around these subjects. And my mom has so much audacity because now that I talk about sex, she's trying to talk to me about sex. And I'm like, oh, really? 30-odd years are going to be silent. Now you're trying to tell me all your private thoughts. Not really fair. I'm dealing with it. I'm breathing through it. But I love it. And the more that you can see, other people's worth, I think as a person that's dealt with self-worth issues, it's easier for me to look at my son and be like, oh, my God, is he inherently valuable? Or my friends, oh my God, are they inherently valuable? And then think of how you would give them advice, how you would tell them to play in the world and explore themselves and what they desire. And then start reparenting the young person that you once were and see if you can find those through lines and see if you can find the desires of your heart that you had since you were a young person and actually allow yourself to lean into those things. That's what I did. And also, embodiment is huge. If anyone is not familiar with the practice of embodiment, I cannot recommend it enough. My friend Jamie Lee Finch has a book called You Are Your Own. I have a friend, Tara Tang. If anyone follows me on Instagram, @GodIsGray, there's resources I post all the time. And embodiment is saying, this is the vessel that you were given. This is as divine as anything else. And don't call your body an it. Call your body a he or she or they. Give your being honor because she is the one carrying me through this life. And if I knew she was worthy and if I knew she wasn't disgusting flesh machine, then I would have advocated for her in these sexual situations and I would have advocated for her joy. Embodiment also means recognizing cognitive dissonance. Your body will give you signals. I remember the first time I was told that my gay friends were going to hell. It was like my whole body tensed up and I felt like I was going to vomit was my immediate reaction to it. And then I was supposed to swallow it and be like, oh, but thus saith the Lord. That's not true. Your body tells you messages. Your body knows because your body is the intuitive thing that is carrying you through this life. And it's as divine as any other piece of you. And it's as worthy as any other piece of you. And when you start honoring her, it's the same thing you're taught when you're little. And that's what blew my mind too. Every adult would be like, if you walk by an alleyway and all your hair sticks up on your arms and you feel like you're going to vomit, you keep walking. You don't go down the alleyway. Church told me, when we make you feel that way, you have to go down that alley because thus saith the Lord. It's a lie. That's a lie. Your body is telling you things, and your body knows. And then when you experience these traumatic things too, sometimes it's based on a past trauma that you can actually let go of. As an adult, it could be a trauma that you experienced as a child that comes up maybe in a really safe sexual situation with someone that you do really trust. Advocate that you have a partner there with you, no matter it's a one-night stand or your husband or wife. It's someone that you can trust to say, hey, when my body is positioned in this way, I feel something. It's bringing up a trauma for me. I don't like it. Can we switch positions? As simple as that. And then you can go to your therapist or whoever, your embodiment coach, and find that trauma and dig it up and be like, oh, it's because when my body was in that position last time, da-da-da. And you start healing those past traumas with safe people. And that safe person can also be you. Masturbation is wonderful. If you're not an asexual being, if you're a sexual being, that is also a lie, y'all, straight up. Masturbation is the practice of love. Remember the 3 things I told you about? Love God, love your neighbor as yourself. You are loving yourself in those moments. This is not stealing orgasms that your husband or wife deserves. You do not run out of orgasms. You don't... I mean, okay. I mean, the pseudoscience that I have, not even pseudoscience, it's not pseudoscience, the lies that pastors have told you about running out of orgasms, or the lies that male pastors will say about, like, well, you know, if a woman learns how to use a vibrator, she's not going to want your penis. And I'm like, yes, I will. It's fine. You're fine. Thanks for the support back there. And that really can be also healing traumas and recognizing what your body needs and deserves. If you can find enough space and grace and love for yourself to light a candle and mindfully give yourself physical love and learn your body and what it desires, then you will know what you deserve when you're partnered. And it would be hard to say to your kids, again, Dr. Tina is back there, she's the expert on it. This is what we have to tell our children too. There's such things as excess. Everything is about balance. Like, you know, too much toxic pornography. Like, I personally don't watch pornography. It's very complicated with trafficking, all kinds of stuff. Like, please make it ethically sourced if you're watching it. That's what I say. But otherwise, be mindful. Give yourself that honor. Give yourself that time and space. And it will translate, which also, by the way, give yourself time for a journey. The very first time I mindfully had embodied sex, mind, body, and soul, was, again, from Linda K. Klein's book, Pure. She said she realized that she was always leaving God out of the bedroom. She was like, I'm doing this deplorable thing that you hate, God, so you stay out here and I'll go in here. And I realized I'd been having sex like that since the beginning of my sexual journey, because even when I was married, I could have been doing it more holy. I should have done it, like, it was never good enough for God, the evangelical God with a lowercase g, not the real one. And so I took a cue from Linda K. Klein, and I was walking into my bedroom with a fuckboy, pardon my French. And I was just in this habit of, like, oh, I'm at a bar, I'm seducing this person, and we're going, like, I was just in a bad pattern, to be honest. But this time, instead of saying, God, wait outside, I'm going to do this thing that I know isn't going to end very well and whatever, I was like, okay, come in here with me, which is just psychological. Divinity is always with you. But this time I was mindfully like, you're a part of this. My divine being is going to be in this situation. So I stayed there. The sex wasn't that great because he wasn't a very connected person. I didn't feel safe. And I allowed myself to feel that. I was like, this isn't great. I could have taken or left this. Do I need this? No. And I walked out of the room, and instead of being like, you disgusting piece of trash, or instead of being like, okay, God, let's reconvene and be friends again, I walked out of the bedroom with God, and he left, the fuckboy, and I sat there and was like, okay, so how do we feel? Hey, girl, how do we feel? Did we feel pleasure? Is he going to call us again? Do we like him? And I have to say I haven't gotten in that situation again because when my full being was present, I only felt like inviting really good experiences. But allow yourself that journey, please. You're not going to do it perfectly. This is like a 20-year journey I've been on, and I'm still learning. I might still mess up tomorrow. Give yourself that grace and space because you're getting to know her or him for the first time in your life, maybe. And you're getting to know partnered sex in a healthy way for the first time in your life. And it's going to take a moment. So, yes, I hope that helps. So I only have 1 minute left. Josie's going to the back if anyone would like to order this book box that I made, or if you don't want the whole box, it's on Amazon. I think it's still 50% on Amazon, which is Jeff Bezos, whatever. It's like $11 on Amazon right now, on Barnes & Noble. And I will also meet you in the back if you'd like to talk. I guess that's it. Thank you for coming.